Do you know, the country you know as Russia today, which was once a breakaway country from the Soviet Union, the popularity of the Russian-Ukrainian war involving the Soviets indirectly spread the opinion that the Soviets were Russians, even though this was misguided. Russia is only one of the former Soviet Union countries with an area stretching along Eurasia. The Soviet Union was a unit consisting of 15 countries. Many say that Russia is Soviet because coincidentally the country's capital is in the Moscow region. Moreover, the territory of the Soviet Union is currently also dominated by the Russian RSFS, which is the largest and strongest republic. So, what exactly was the Soviet Union and what was inside the country? Getting to know the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a federation of several countries that had a socialist-communist ideology that had been established since 1922, called the Soviet Socialist Republic, RSS. It was first founded to have 4 countries, namely the Russian Soviet Federated Socialist Republic, Russian RSS, Transcaucasian SFSR, Ukrainian SSR, and Byelorussian SSR. From these 4 countries it grew to 15 countries entering 1956, including Azerbaijan, Armenia, Estonia, Georgia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Ukraine, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And all these countries only follow a one-party political system, and this party is the Communist Party. This was until 1990, even though in reality the Soviet Union was a political unity consisting of many countries in the Soviet Republic. Even though the government system is very centralized and implements a planned economic system. So what is the history that underlies the formation of the Soviet Union? History of the formation of the Soviet Union. The era of Tsar Nicholas II's leadership. The embryo of the Soviet Union came from the Russian Empire, which was the predecessor of the Russian Empire, led by an emperor with the nickname Tsar. Not a good leader because at that time the Tsar was a leader whose actions were arbitrary towards his people. Industrial development emerged during the era of Tsar Nicholas II's leadership in 1984. Industry was running rapidly, including mining, oil, coal, iron and weapons. Apart from that, their industrial development is no less developed than industry in Western Europe, giving rise to competition. The development of this industry also caused the emergence of a class or group of workers or proletarians. They were made slaves of the bourgeoisie, causing social inequality to emerge among Russian society. Conditions that give rise to a movement, which is called the socialism movement. This movement against capitalists in Russia continued to struggle until the Social Democratic Party was born in 1989. The originator of the emergence of this movement and the birth of this party was George Plekhanov, supported by many workers. This party fights for equality in the law, press, independence and improvement of faith for prosperity. However, in 1903 this party split into the Socialist Party, which was still led by George, and the Communist Party led by Vladimir Lenin. Apart from industrial development, the Tsar II era also gave rise to many wars, especially between Russia and Japan in mid-1904–1905, until Japan finally won. This defeat caused people's trust in Tsar Nicholas to decline and the Socialist and Communist parties demanded changes to the Russian Empire. Until the era of Tsar Nicholas collapsed, one of which was marked by the Bloody Sunday incident which broke out on January 22, 1905, leading to strikes and a massive uprising in St. Petersburg. It peaked in 1917 until the February Revolution took place when Tsar Nicholas was taken prisoner and abdicated. Russia was finally led by liberals from February to October 1917. The workers' revolution was achieved. The Communist Party promised hope and other promises and suggested seizing land for shared. Bloodshed occurred between supporters of Tsar Nicholas II, Putin's army, and the Communists or Red Army. The conflict resulted in the Communists winning. Power fell into the hands of Vladimir Lenin. Supported by Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin in forming a triad to become the new leaders of the Russian Empire, and at the same time the declaration of the Soviet Union was formalized. Founding of the Soviet Union. The October Revolution marked the founding of the Soviet Union, precisely on October 25, 1917. Areas that previously had socialism changed to communism. This era began under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, who established a communist state in 1919. He also formed the Comintern, or international community, whose task was to spread communist ideology to the world. Vladimir Lenin gave freedom of political rights to women with his efforts to break the patriarchal family system. Apart from that, implementing the new economic policy, NEP, by exempting farmers from all levies and allowing them to sell excess products on the open market. A system that benefited farmers while making life in the Soviet Union's economy. However, Joseph Stalin, who became Vladimir Lenin's successor, made major changes to industry, including abolishing the NEP. Replaced by large industrialization, collectivity from agriculture to control of economic activity. It was during this time that the cruelty of the communist government was most felt. Joseph Stalin did not even hesitate to eliminate political competitors for power. He also adopted Adolf Hitler's steps. By establishing a special camp for dissidents and named the Gulag, to prevent the emergence of dangerous attempts that threatened Joseph Stalin's position. Cleansing of ethnic minorities occupying Central Asia and Siberia 1936 to 1952, Mikhail Gorbachev emerged as the new leader after Joseph Stalin died, bringing new policies in the form of perestroika and glasnost. Perestroika is related to changes in social and economic policies. Increasing discipline of party cadres, workers, and campaigning against alcohol consumption. Glasnost's policy is related to making it easier for the public to access information freely and eliminating previously imposed censorship. Mikhail Gorbachev also issued amendments to the election law in 1998, stating that parties outside the Communist Party had the right to nominate themselves for national and local level officials. The collapse of the Soviet Union. Article 72 of the Soviet Union Constitution, after Mikhail Gorbachev, after amending the election law, stated that states have the freedom to secede. This article is the basis and makes the states independent one by one. This article is one of the things that caused the Soviet Union to collapse and become several splinter countries. Apart from several factors that caused it, the public's freedom to access information made major changes to the former Soviet Union countries, such as easing disputes between the Eastern Bloc, Soviet Union, and the Western Bloc filled with the United States. And this condition gives rise to social conflict among community groups, competing for influence and power. Like moderate groups who are elbowing each other, there are those who agree with reform and believe that communism will continue. Meanwhile, conservative groups oppose reform and only want to implement communism, including radical groups who support reform and abandon communism. It was marked by a coup from the vice president, Gennady Yanayev, although it was thwarted by Boris Yeltsin's radical group. Until Gorbachev resigned from his position as president, Boris Yeltsin became the leader. However, his stance did not receive support from many countries, and they even broke away. This condition finally caused the Soviet Union to collapse on September 6, 1991. The Soviet Union was disbanded and then divided into several sovereign countries. Apart from that, it makes the Russian Federation the heir to the greatness of the Soviet Union. Except for the Balkans, countries previously under the Soviets are now under Russian leadership through the Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS. Factors causing the collapse of the Soviet Union: the failure of Marxism-Communism and the Cold War. The Cold War emerged in 1946, which ultimately led to a technological war. The Soviet Union became the first country capable of placing humans in space and creating a positive outlook for the international world. The Cold War actually had a negative impact on economic continuity, ranging from waste to difficulty in determining policies, perestroika, and glasnost policy. The crisis gave rise to these two ideologies, but the freedom that society had actually gave rise to new polemics. starting from a decline in the quality of people's lives to increasing crime. The impact of these two policies also made it easier for Joseph Stalin to purge political opponents and ethnic minorities. Separation of states. The impact of perestroika and glasnost policies also caused many separatist movements to emerge by separating from the Soviet Union and establishing their own countries. Strengthened by the amendment to the Soviet Union election law through Article 71. This increasingly caused many countries to separate themselves from the Soviet Union. The Warsaw Pact disbands. The Warsaw Pact was an international defense organization for the Eastern Bloc countries. The direct collapse of the Soviet Union also caused the Warsaw Pact to end on July 1, 1991, except for Russia, which immediately joined their old and enemy organization called NATO, even though it has now left. Impact of the collapse of the Soviet Union. The end of the Cold War between the Western Bloc led by the United States and the Eastern Bloc controlled by the Soviet Union. Many communist countries after separating from the Soviet Union changed their state policies to become democratic countries. World anxiety about the possibility of World War III is reduced because the enemy of the West, in this case the Soviet Union, is reduced. The United States emerged as a superpower and the fall of communism in several Eastern European countries. This is an explanation of the Soviet Union, starting from the history of its founding, the factors that caused its collapse to the impact of the Soviet collapse.